Okay, so welcome to Photo 72 for the 20th of January. And we're going to be doing the Develop module today, so I'm really excited about that. If you have questions, please make sure I repeat them because they are recording us for the people online. And then also for some of you, I know particularly this module people like to listen to again. And so this will be available for you to hear, since I will be so exciting and so interesting, you will only want to hear it yet again in the near future. So hopefully it will be worth the effort. And I'm going to say goodbye because who wants to see me? They want to see Lightroom and photographic design. So we are moving forward in our study of Lightroom, and there's you guys have done a lot of good work. I'm going to share my laptop. And I've seen a lot of things happening inside of Canvas, a lot of good conversations. I've been trying to keep up with questions as they came up. Some of them are more like, the answer is, we'll talk about that soon, and but at least I know that's on your mind. Some of them I can answer right away. So as you go through the discussion, you'll see that I'm adding content there pretty regularly to your questions. Our module this week is Module 3. And you'll notice that Sketching to See is now due February 1st, but we're going on to Module 3. There'll be a little assignment with this module, which I think you'll really enjoy, which is to do a photograph and then post the before and after. And so you'll post one picture with no change. It's not as big a project as the first project or as the next project. It's just a small project, but it's a really instructive project when you do it. You'll learn a lot by doing it, and you'll learn a lot by seeing each other's. Sunny.
What do you about that sketching time?
Okay, sketching. Let's talk about sketching afterward because we're also going to talk about the recycled project afterwards. But we're going to focus on development now. But thank you. The sketching is Sketching to See is what you're going to be working on, and then Develop module before and after. So our objectives for this week are utilize the power of Adobe, Photoshop, Lightroom, and the Develop module. Understand the difference between virtual copies and snapshots and when to use each. And use the pathways from Photoshop to Lightroom and back in an effective way for picture making. And this is really, Lightroom has continued to grow. And for some of you, and I can look around, I know some of you will only use Lightroom, either because that's your preference or because you don't want to spend the money on Photoshop, or because it does what you need it to do. But there are times when you'll want to go to Photoshop, and to know when to do that and what order to do that in and what implications that might have to your files is really important. Also that virtual copy versus snapshots, it will be really useful as we go through that. So we're going to look at the Develop module and those different things. So I'm going to start out and ask, what have you learned? And so we've done a few weeks, and then you'll say it and I'm going to repeat it so we get it recorded. So who has learned something in the first 3 weeks? Janet?
Learning how to import.
Okay, learning how to import. Importing into Lightroom is a big thing.
And the difference between add and copy.
Okay, and we looked at the difference between add and copy, and as I don't recommend move, to know that you don't accidentally do that. I have accidentally done that and been sad. So add and copy is your preference for that area.
Export to my desktop.
You learned how to export to your desktop. That's very exciting. Yeah, and that, really in the end, to be able to use the Lightroom pictures for something else requires some form of export. And we'll learn more about that in the coming weeks. So congratulations, Marion. Sunny.
I got an appreciation for collections. I never used it. I used some spot collections, but I never used collections the way you showed it.
Okay, so the appreciation of collections, and I think that is something that will make your life in Lightroom much more interesting. We will talk about that more as we get to the output modules, because the output modules also give you the option of yet another kind of collection. So that'll be exciting. Thank you. Any other urgent things that people have learned? Yeah.
I learned that Bart Disney book deals with every possible permutation.
So,
Not memorized.
Smart Naming book has every permutation, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, of Lightroom, and you have not memorized. I think that I would give you permission to see it as a reference book. And I try to go to other books. I've looked, I assure you, I have looked at many, many books. And I think the thing about this particular book, although it is very dense and has lots of information, is that it will grow with you, and it's good for people at any level. At the same time, I think you're right that it is not required to memorize, and it is a reference book.
I have become aware of smart collections.
Smart collections, okay.
However, I'm somewhat perplexed as to how to use it effectively.
Okay, and we might see a little bit, as I'm going through to do the develop module, there'll be some things I'll refer to as I do it. And so some of those will review and reinforce how you use collections and how you use these different tools. Can we have the lights halfway out so you guys can see the screen a little better? So there's one that just does the center, and there's one that does the two edges. So perfect. I think that's okay for you guys. Does that work? Okay. So people in the classroom are happy. Looks like everyone online is happy. And we're going to go to the next one. Okay. So now we're going to look at the develop module. Downloading, keywording, organizing is your first most powerful aspect of Lightroom. It's one of the things that Lightroom does most uniquely. But adjusting images is actually another very powerful area. And if you look at the screen, you see you can go down this side in order, and you really have a logical way to approach your image. Now, I will say honestly, there is nothing that you will do in Lightroom that you couldn't also, with enough savvy, do in Photoshop. But I find myself, as someone who uses a lot of Photoshop and some pretty heavy-duty Photoshop work, I will often bring things back into Lightroom because it's just simpler. It's obvious what to do, it's obvious where it is, and once I get it right in Lightroom, I can do the next step and the final steps in Photoshop. So you really may find that Lightroom will become your go-to place for adjusting images. The other piece about why Lightroom is so powerful is that essential way that Lightroom is different than Photoshop. Photoshop works on what? When you're adjusting in Photoshop, what are you changing? So, you're doing layers. Okay, you can work in layers, but the actual work is being done on a pixel level, right? You are actually changing. And if you've ever tried this, you might want to try it if you're a Photoshop person. Put a layer on that does something, put another layer on that does something else, and then switch the order. And you'll notice that things change, right? They don't look the same if the layers aren't in the same order. If you get a lot of layers, you can actually have, when you flatten it, something totally different happen. That's because Photoshop's working on pixels. The amazing part of Lightroom is that you can make it lighter, darker, contrastier, this, that, the other thing. And then in the end, the mathematics of Lightroom stops and says, okay, this is the effect my photographer owner wants. This is the best way to apply the mathematical changes. And so it will apply, no matter what order you did the changes in, it applies them to the final file in the least destructive, most effective way. And so that is like the biggest, great value of this. Starting in Lightroom 4, and most of you won't have an issue with this because you're relatively new to Lightroom, there was a new processing of images called Process 2012. So with that, you got a lot more controls over the images. If any of you did work in Lightroom 3 or have images that are historic to Lightroom 3, this process can really change the image. So if you had a perfect image and then you applied this process, it would unperfectness it. So you don't want to do that. So only if you do have historic images, please only use this with new images. And you'll see it right here. Let's go over to Lightroom, and we'll take one image into the develop. And you'll see as we come here that we have the 2012, and there's the process. So if you had a historic image that you were bringing in, you actually would have the option to take it back either to 2003 or to 2010 if you had some need to time travel. I would say at this point, if I had anything from back then, I probably would go back to the raw file and reimagine it because the tools are so much more powerful. But the fact is you do have that option. Okay, and that's true of, just leave that there. Okay, going back to here. So in these controls, you're going to have the ability, what you gained was the ability to lower and higher highlights. Before this, in the earlier time, you could only raise highlights, and lower and higher both shadows and blacks. So it's much more powerful than the earlier versions of Lightroom. So you see here is the display. We have, starting from the top, we have the color temperature, which is the first thing we're probably going to address on most images. Then we have exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, in a kind of logical order to deal with. There's a handout called Photo Editing Terms, Photo 72, and Develop Module Before and After. Those are the two handouts for this week, which are available on the handout page. I won't click through. And they'll go through these, and we'll look at those in a second. We'll go right here. You think it is? Oh, dear. Is that true? Okay. Yes, it is. Okay, thank you for letting me know. If you find any broken handouts, any broken links, please let me know what page. I'm trying to catch them, but sometimes on my computer, they don't look broken until get to this point. I am checking, but I'll ask you to let me know, and I'll repair them as soon as possible. So if we're here, I want to start out with the histogram, because for many people the histogram is a mysterious thing. This is a histogram. And the histogram, as it says from the glossary of starting photography, a graph that represents the distribution of pixel brightness within a digital image. So really, it's a count. It is a count of how many pixels are black, not quite black, gray, lighter gray, lighter gray, lighter gray, all the way to white. And so, and when you see the colors, it's also a count of how many pixels are represented by each color. So as you learn to read this graph, you can make better choices about your picture. You can notice things. There is not a good and a bad histogram. There is not. It is more about the histogram represents the picture, and is there any danger in this particular picture for what's going to happen. So we're going to go back to Lightroom. To a picture like this and go over to the histogram. And if I look at this picture and you look at this histogram, there's no real surprise there, is there? This picture really is representative of dark, the silhouette of the statues, and light of the sky. So we have a lump here. These are the statues, and that's the sky, right? And it's not wrong. I mean, that's not maybe, that's not a histogram that makes your heart warm, but it's not wrong because it represents the picture, and the picture is what I haven't actually adjusted this, but it's what maybe I want. I will point out in the Develop module, and we're going to start at the top, if I click here, and you see I'm clicking on these little boxes, highlight clipping and shadow clipping. And if you hover over things, you can see what they are. It pops up. And if I was to come into the basic curve and raise my exposure slowly, do it like this, you will see, what are you seeing? See the red? So that red is telling you that those pixels have fallen off of the table. They're too bright. They're beyond the capacity of the file. And if I go the other way and start getting darker, then you'll start to see what color? Blue. And it's going to take me a while. Keep going. Too bored. Okay, there we go. When in doubt, go extreme. So now those areas have fallen off of what is representational. You could not print them. They're very, very, very black. So in an image like this, while I have a lump in the darks and a spike in the brights, all the pixels actually are in the range that could be represented either in a file or in printing. And so let's go back here and find another image. Oops. And so here is a sun rays. Again, the red is where it's so bright. Now this is where you have to ask. In this case, I probably would pull down a little bit on the brights to try and pull in those details in the clouds. But I don't mind some spectral highlights. That's what they would be called, spectral highlights, that might be too bright to represent in the image. In this image, if I was going to adjust, I would actually start out. I want the clouds neutral, so I would get my eyedropper from my color balance and neutralize the clouds. I would take my highlights down, maybe, and I can actually watch the red, hopefully, sort of the white disappear. Not very fast. Yeah, I'm doing it. So you can see it. I'm actually clicking, and then I could drag here, right? Or I can do the keyboard step by step. A little bit less, and the shadows a little bit less. And then I'll turn off the clipping notices so we don't see them. And so you can see it kind of change based on what I'm changing. And you see, again, that this is a count of how many pixels are in the bright. Most of this, over two-thirds of this picture is bright, and some of it is dark, and that's sort of the dark area. Yes?
With the eyedropper, you click on a face to keep up with a medium grade.
Right, so we're going to start, let's talk about color next. That's a good, with the eyedropper, what did I do? Usually in any picture, I would recommend thinking about color first. So white balance, the eyedropper, if you have a neutral space in a picture, you can click on that neutral space and it will automatically fix your color. If you don't have a neutral place, then you have to guess.
I don't understand.
Okay, let's do it. Not understanding is good. That's a start. So I'm going to look at, here's another. Let's look here. I actually picked this one for this. So how would I adjust this picture? Actually, one of the first things I might do with this picture, because it's crooked and it drives me crazy, is go to the Develop module. And I might go to Lens Corrections and enable Profile Corrections. Some people would do this first. Can you see it move as I enable the Profile Corrections? And then I can also manually come and straighten the picture. I know it is. I'm sorry. There's, I'm doing lens corrections. Let's see if I can, I wanted you to be able to see the picture though while I'm changing it. So I'm using lens corrections. Okay, and then I want it to constrain. And I'll make it large for the people in the classroom. So that looks a little straighter, doesn't it? And maybe the vertical. So I've gone to lens corrections. I've activated the profile. It knows my lens that I was using. Sometimes, most of the time it does, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't know your lens, there is great detail in Martin Evening about how to make lens. And I have had lenses I had to make custom profiles for. And then manually I moved the picture to straighten it. Okay. Once I get out of here, I'm going to go up to the basics. And this is what we were talking about for color. This wasn't a very deep shadow. So I'm going to grab this eyedropper right here. And then I'm going to come over here. And you can see that there's a grid. And the grid is letting me find something that I might want to neutralize. And what's really cool, it's not very dramatic in this one, but it is very cool. If you look over here to the navigator, let's see if I can make the navigator a little bit bigger. So there's the navigator, and as I move over it, the navigator will sort of change color. I'll go to a more dramatic one in a second. So I'm going to pick in the window and give that a click in order to neutralize the color. So the eyedropper will make whatever you click on it neutral gray.
So you picked that spot because you remembered.
I picked it because, no, I picked it because I decided I wanted to be. I picked it because when I look at the grid, it seems like it's a neutral spot. And then I can also look over at the navigator and see if it seems to make sense. Let's just go.
So you click on the window there.
So let's do it. Okay, this one. All right, so if I take the eyedropper and I go to the green, look what happens to the navigator. Because green, we don't want the green to be neutral, obviously. If I go up to the sky, look how yellow it all turns. So whatever I click on, so now I'm going to go to the roof of this little building. In fact, I'm going to zoom so I can get to the roof a little better. I want that roof neutral. And it's a pretty subtle change, but it's, if we go before and after, it's definitely a different color. And sometimes a subtle change will make an immense difference in how your picture looks.
So what are you targeting with the neutral?
Something that is neutral. Right, what am I targeting when I pick what is neutral?
Why a gray versus a white?
Oh, okay. So the question was why a gray versus a white. You don't want a pure white because it doesn't have enough data for it to work on. And you don't want a pure black. So you want something in the gray, something in the tones, bright, darker than white and lighter than black. That's where you'll get the best result. So again, if I went over to the greens, I would get a really horrible color. If I went into the blues, I'd get a really yellow. But by going to hopefully the roof, I get a better color. Remember, we have our history too. There, I think that was the best one. And you can go back in history. So that sort of it's a tool you have to get used to. I will say that.
Is there an auto version, like in Camera Raw, there's an auto white balance? Yeah.
There always is.
There's always.
You wouldn't use that though, Tara. Would you use auto white balance too?
Try it and see what it does.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can come here and do auto. Mm-hmm. I am a control freak, so I don't tend to use the auto buttons. I tend to click around aimlessly and then fix it until I like it. But that's not a Terry suggestion that you try the auto and then adjust from the auto. Often. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Now exposure. You see, I'm hovering over exposure. Hopefully, actually, let's get the lights all the way out right now because I think that they can see the screen better. Dark, all the way out. Dark, dark. For those in the classroom. Can you see? And hopefully you can see it online too. Do you see when I'm on the exposure? My arrow's on the exposure, and up here there's a kind of graying of that center part. So that is the part that will be most affected by me changing exposure. When I go to highlights, do you see that the gray is over to the right? And that part, when I move the highlight, now this is all these tones are connected. You really almost can't move one tone without affecting others. But whichever one I hover over, see now the shadows? Can you guys see that? So over on the left, there's a highlight on that and then I can move the shadows. I can move the whites, which is very, very, very high up, or I can move the blacks, which is all the way down on the far left. So that sort of gives you a sense of what you're moving. Now, anything you move, you have to remember, I'm going to go back to the straight color, that it's like a slinky. Everything is connected. And at the same time, you're going to be picking up the slinky from the highlights or picking up the slinky from the shadows, therefore affecting those tones most. But everything will sort of follow along. So I'm going to look at this picture, and I'm just looking at my screen, which is obviously a little different than what you might see in any case, but I'm going to do some little adjustments to this. Okay. And so a Y will give you before and after. And you can see there's a little bit of change in color, a little bit of change of intensity. It looks pretty washed out up on the projection, but it looks better. Make it look good on your screen. So very subtle in this case. We're working with very subtle changes. So when we talk about color, the eyedropper in a neutral, preferably not a pure white or pure black, but in some gray area. And this is why some of you might start choosing to carry a gray card or a color checker. You could take a picture in a difficult lighting situation at the beginning of your photographic shoot. And from there, you can use that to adjust. I won't demonstrate that today, but I can demonstrate that another time, how you'd use a gray card or a color checker. Right now, if you have a neutral gray in your frame, you can use that. Temperature is warm or cold, which is blue or red, and tint is green or pink. So when you look at Lightroom, and we look at as big as possible, temperature is right here, and temperature will go from yellow to blue. Tint will go from green to pink. So once you've sort of gotten it set, then you can start moving it, perhaps for creative ends. So there's lots of different ways to do that. After the color, we talked about tonal controls. So exposure is how light or dark. And from the Lightroom information, they're in increments equivalent to exposure values, or f-stops, on your camera. And that can help some of you start thinking about how to change exposure. Contrast is how light or dark things are. Then we have highlights, whites, shadows, and blacks. And those are the controls we have for the tones. And again, because of the magic of Lightroom, it doesn't matter what order you put these in. You can put them in any order you like. The next thing is presence, clarity, vibrance, and saturation. So I'm going to go back to Lightroom, and I'm going to go to a different photograph. And again, if I was to come here, go here and then I'm going to close this. I'd first go here and I'd pick something I thought should be gray, and I could change the color. Maybe that's, if I don't like it, then I can choose something else. I think that's a little better. And then as I came down, I can set up so I can see where I'm going to lose things. So these highlights back here in the trees are going pure white. I probably don't care about that. I mean, that kind of highlight might just be okay. You have to decide. I can try to go down a little bit on it so it's not quite so much, both on the whites and the highlights. So now I'm going to turn that off. Then I think it's going to be a little bit darker. And all right. So now I'm going to think about clarity, vibrance, and saturation. And I think these are controls that you want to be pretty careful with. Clarity is kind of a mid-tone contrast. It can really pop things quite a bit, but you don't want to overdo it, because then when you finally get out, it's kind of a sharpening that you always want to be very careful with sharpening. Generally, as I work with clarity, I will try 5, and then I will use my arrow key up just a little bit at a time, and probably not go much above 15. There's people who might do differently there, but that's how I tend to work. And vibrance and saturation both have to do with color. Vibrance will increase your color without affecting the strongest colors. Saturation can get very weird very fast, and I can pretty much say that I don't use saturation almost ever, unless, I'll just say I don't use saturation. I will use a little bit of vibrance, especially in a picture like this where I want the colors to stay. So that's the basic panel. Any questions about that right now?
When you're doing the arrow keys, have you clicked on clarity and then use arrow keys?
Right. So when you're doing the arrow keys, how do you do it? For any of these, you click on it, and then you use the up and down arrow keys to change the number.
And you click it in a specific spot, or
Click right in the number.
Click on the values.
Right. You see how the number's white?
yes.
That's when you can change it.
Okay.
You can also grab this little arrow and move it side to side.
So that's
You can also grab up here, although I don't do that. That just seems a little tacky. I don't know. I don't know why it seems tacky. It just seems like, you know, it's kind of like a hammer. It's not real. I kind of like working down here with the numbers and doing, like, slowly watching the picture and going one step at a time with the arrow key. Some people do just grab this and go where they want to go. So you see I'm grabbing the little arrowhead. And here, I'm just here, and then I'm using my pointer. I'm using my up and down arrow key. It seems a little more precise to me. Anyone have another way they like to work? Okay. Yeah, Sonny.
Black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But when you move the red to one side, does the red go over the deep red and a light red, or what? What's the effect of red?
Yeah, the histogram has all of the colors. And some of the changes, so the question was, you can understand it being for black and white, but we're also affecting colors.
So red is all the way down.
Well, there's no red all the way down. Wait,
I mean,
you're talking about this on the histogram?
Yeah.
What little arrow turns out?
Yeah. I'm not going to the red color.
This red color peeking up.
Yeah.
It's just a count of the colors in the frame. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, there's just a peak in that particular tone with a lot of red, and I don't think it has any. There's nothing really to say about it. It's good to know. It may be relevant in some more advanced techniques, but for us, we basically our most biggest concern on the histogram is not so much this as here and here, the shadow and the highlight. That's what you want to be concerned about. Okay, so I saw Telek and then Mike. Okay, Mike.
If you use this, that panel to set white and black points, do you follow it?
Do you use that panel to set white and black points? That you can do depending on the picture. How can I? My pictures do tend to be a little more, what would you say, delicate. And so I don't tend to push my white and black points so much, but you could actually just grab it there and go all the way to the white and black point, and then start working with the centers. And some images, and I know Mike asked about the white and black points, and with your underwater pictures that you do, you often have to kind of drag it open because there's no contrast down there. You can also do that with contrast. You can do some of that. And you'll see that by doing that, look what I did with to the whites and the blacks and the numbers. So let's come here, and this is where it came in imported. That was the histogram. There's no numbers, and then by pulling it with the contrast, I now have 11 on contrast, 39 plus on whites, and 13 minus on blacks. So that could be a way to do that without question.
So one last question. So the yellow arrow and the black and red, when it turns yellow and red, that is
this?
yeah, when it's turning color.
Well, when it's warning you right now that the yellow, for whatever reason, is falling off before the other colors. It's not totally off. Am I right? Kathy, we're going to say something? The question was about why the arrow turns yellow. So if I go too far, I'll get that blue. You can see that the yellow is a little bit outside of the other colors. So it's just giving the warning that the yellow is already a little bit already clipping a bit.
That might mean there's too much yellow in the picture. Is that what that means?
Could mean there's too much yellow, but more often it just means that the yellow's gone very dark. This is a really warm building, and so of the tones, the yellow's already clipping. It's already not fully expressed. Does it mean I'll lose detail in the yellow? If there was detail in the yellow, but there's not because it's a big black blob. So it's a silhouette, so it may, that's where, just like when you have a spectral highlight that sparkles red with the red indicator. Let me go this till it gets. I'm not going to do it.
Is represented by you're actually losing that color off the end.
Right. Yeah, you can see when I go like this that the yellow is not in alignment. There's a lot more yellow in this dark shadow than there is blue or red, because the building has a yellow color to it. So when I push it to dark, the yellow is going to be off before the other colors. But since I'm going to a silhouette, it's not, in this case, it doesn't matter. And that's what you have to sort of figure out, is when does it matter and when doesn't it matter. Yeah?
I have a question about the eyedropper. Do you use it every single
do you use the eyedropper on every single image? I use it quite a bit, but we can look at something like this, and there's not going to be anything that would be neutral in this picture. There is nothing I could use the eyedropper on because the bark is brown and the leaves are green. And so this would be a situation, if I was going to do a whole series in this park, I might have shot a gray card before I started and used the gray card to get my neutral. Also to realize that neutral isn't the only answer. Neutral is kind of a starting point. Sunset is not neutral. Sunrise is not neutral. This area is not neutral. It's a warm, glowing area because of all the growth. So I might not choose to make things neutral all the time, but I want to know what they are, what they look like neutral, and then work creatively off of that.
Can you use the eyedropper, use the eyedropper on another picture and have the ability affected on another? Like if you were in a park, how many kinds of gray card?
Okay, so the question has to do with synchronizing anything. Let's ask me that again in a little while after we've gone through a few more controls, and then I'll talk about synchronizing because there's a couple ways to synchronize. Okay, now this handout is kind of getting just to the essence. There is many more controls in Lightroom that you could consider. But after you've gone through the basic panel, there's details and there's lens correction. Later on, you can explore the rest of them, but right now I want you to kind of get used to these controls. So details, there's sharpening, noise reduction, and there's lens correction. So let's look at those in the panel, and then we'll talk about synchronization as you asked. That's a great picture. Neat. Okay, one thing in development you can do, and I don't know if this is going to be a good example, but let's give it a try anyway, is looking at detail. In our detail panel, we have two controls. One is sharpening, and one is noise reduction. This print was taken, this image was taken at 1600, and so there is, you can see a texture to it that almost looks like graying if you were thinking about film. It's a reaction to the high ISO that it was taken at. And so I could activate the noise reduction to try and, let me get this to, this is a 100% view. So I can take out the luminance and a little bit of contrast and change the color and try to smooth it out by moving these controls. Getting rid of noise in Lightroom will tend to make the picture a little bit softer. It is the cost of getting rid of the digital noise. And it's probably way more subtle than you can see, but I think there's a change. Am I right? Tell me there's a change.
That looks blurry.
But it does look a little bit blurrier. Of course, it is a moving picture. It's from a car. I mean, the picture is kind of, you know, it's a pretty blurry picture. Let's go back to the library. And I'm going to find another high ISO picture. Maybe not. That one's it. Okay, so you can see the noise there. I think that accidentally was at a high ISO. So let me go to develop. Again, I will. Noise can be two ways. It can be a kind of light-dark effect of the pixels, and then it can be a color effect. And so you just move the sliders to find that kind of sweet spot where you minimize the noise and maximize the sharpness. And there's numbers in the Martin Evening book that might. That's better. That's actually, you can actually see that difference. I think. Can I see it? Yeah. That's a lot smoother. And since, let's see what the ISO, and this one is an ISO, I caught myself. So I'd been doing long exposures, and then, so this one was at 16, and this one was at 3200. So if we look at this one, and then look at that, I mean, so now, I mean, you really see the effect of having the wrong ISO in this situation. This is 200. And this is, it's the darker also, but it's 1600. Hey, Sandy.
Hi. When would you attempt to do this rather than doing the noise reduction in camera?
When would you attempt to do this instead of the noise reduction in camera? You know, that's an interesting question, and there's different spots that you can do noise reduction. Some of you may or may not know that. Some of you have a setting in your camera that will do some noise reduction, some, or you can do it afterwards. And there's a couple, you can do it in camera, it will do some of it. You still may want to fine tune it in either Lightroom or you can use plugins that we'll talk about in a few weeks, like that will do even more for noise. Sometimes the situation, because most cameras, if you use noise reduction, it will take as long for the image to process as it took to take it. Now, if you're in a fast-moving situation or the light is changing really quickly, that is a sacrifice to wait for the camera to process each image. And so I often, especially in night photography, will choose to do the noise reduction afterwards in interest of getting more images in the moment. But I think that depending on the situation, there may or you may sometimes choose to do it in camera. I don't know that in camera is better or not. I'm going to have to do a little reading on that. I think Lightroom does probably as good a job as in camera, it's just that you have to do it in addition. Does anyone else have done any research on noise reduction and have any? Some of you have done a lot of work with long exposures.
It's a real pain when you have a noise reduction on it. You get a 20-second exposure, you have to sit there for 20 seconds to get a picture. Yeah,
so the problem, as I mentioned, is if you took a 20-second exposure, you'd have to sit there and wait 20 seconds for the next image, which could often mean that you might miss the moment and you couldn't take as many images. There's also some additional software if you have real noise issues, and I know a few of you, like Sandy, works with really long exposures. What do you use usually for noise reduction, Sandy?
I do it.
You do it in camera.
You may have an 8-minute exposure, and it takes 16 minutes for that bigger image.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're okay with it taking 60? So an 8-minute exposure becoming 16 is okay with you?
Yes.
Yeah. But do you think it's better than Lightroom doing it?
I don't know.
Yeah. So we now have a point of research that you and I will share, and we'll come back to the class and let them know. Maybe we can do a side-by-side comparison. I would say I usually have noise reduction off in my camera just because I'm too impatient a person, but that may not be that's not the definitive answer to this question. So Kathy, we'll take a note for us to research that. Thanks. A point of research. Okay, camera batteries is another issue. That's true. The noise reduction in camera will use a lot of batteries. Yeah, me too. Me too.
One trick that works really well in some situations, obviously depends on how you're doing it, is making several long exposures and then being average.
So you're talking about doing a HDR.
Kind of.
But using it for so the what Al is saying is taking several exposures, both over and under, and then using them to help you smooth out some of the noise. They may also work. So we're going to do some research to fine tune that aspect of this, and also come back up with some more numbers.
My camera has a checkbox for long exposure noise reduction.
Long exposure.
So uncheck that. The noise reduction works on, let's say, up to 2 seconds. Anything beyond 2 seconds, it doesn't.
Okay, so you have to check your cameras, but Sunny's point is that you can turn off long time, so Sandy's 8-minute exposures would not become 16, but your 1-second exposure could become 2, and you still get the benefit of noise reduction light.
Under the second doesn't make any difference.
Okay, the other box is sharpening, and I'm going to talk more about sharpening in the coming weeks. And let me get down here. It's probably driving you crazy now. I know there's some blurry. Seasickness, I know. Okay, so my point is going to be that this was shot out of the window of a car while moving. I actually kind of like the movement. But the fact is, sharpening is not going to fix this. It's going to emphasize the noise, and it's a blurry picture. And I have to maybe just like that it has that wonderful movement and that Milano kind of, where am I? Milano. It's very romantic. But I can't sharpen something that was soft in the world. There's only so much I can do to that. And let's see how much, if I really push it all the way, what that will look like. So what you see is that in some ways, with a grainy picture like this, a noisy picture, and something where there's actually been movement, in some ways it just makes it feel kind of gritty, right? And sharpening, over-sharpening can do that. If I just go and I have this before and after, the sharpening does a little bit to kind of pop the car, but it's a blurry picture. There's not much to be done. I will say, be very careful with sharpening. There's 3 places where sharpening can be used. When you bring the image in, it is automatically, there's some sharpening applied based on the profile of your camera. When, at this point, you could choose to sharpen the overall picture. And it might be kind of a Hail Mary, have to save this picture effect, but it's something to be used with care. And then you can also, let's go here. Let me get one of the pictures I actually want to work on. So I could go someplace like here. And this is a petroglyphs that are in the Alps of Italy. So when I go to develop this, I'm probably going to start out in my basic panel. I'm going to lower the exposure a little bit. I'm going to raise the contrast. I'm going to definitely maybe raise the clarity more than I usually do to make the petroglyphs stand out. And so maybe I want some of these rock markings to show more. I can actually use a brush and add sharpening just to a specific area, so localized sharpening. So in the develop toolbar, we're looking now at the adjustment brush. The adjustment brush can do all of the changes you can do to a whole photograph. But we're talking about sharpening. And then later, when we talk about output, we then have output sharpening. So that's the 4 major places for sharpening. When you bring a picture in import, you're automatically sharpening somewhat based on the camera profile. 2, you can do an overall sharpening, to be very careful with this, in the bottom, let me close this, in the detail. You can do a localized sharpening with the adjustment brush, and you will do output sharpening when you bring pictures out. Mike?
Do you find that the clarity slider affects sharpening?
The clarity slider is actually, the clarity slider affecting sharpening? The clarity slider is actually a type of sharpening, but it's a sharpening that is in the midtones and avoids the extremes and the edges. And so it is something I do use, but it is something to be cautious about, as in all sharpening, because sharpening becomes cumulative and can create artifacts in your final image if you overdo it. The other piece that I'm going to recommend you look at is the lens correction, which I showed quickly. I'm going to show it again. So if I go here and I go to develop and I come down to lens correction, I want to go to profile and then I'm going to enable a lens correction. And you'll really, let me undo that. Undo that. Can you really see that difference? And it will adjust both for a bend in the lens and for vignetting, darkening or lightening around the edges. The next piece you can do with this panel has to do with fringing. And I don't know if this picture, yeah, this picture does have a little, do you see that little bit of, do you guys see that? There's kind of this blue-green along the edge, like creaky thing along the edge. And so we can ask it to remove chromatic aberrations. And if we go before and after, I don't know, it's pretty dramatic to me. Can you guys see it too? That there's a real difference where this is a place where the lens created a false color. And so in this panel, we can pull that color out. Sometimes, depending on the lens, I mean, look right there. Can you see that green? And now it's gone. See a kind of red over here? And now it's gone over here. So it will really purify some of your colors on your edges. I've had some I've had to go in manually and do more too, but particularly very wide angle lenses will often have some weird chromatic aberrations that you have to take off.
To import your lens profiles?
Do I have to import my lens profile? Many lenses are already shipped with Lightroom. So most of your lenses, knock on Formica really quickly, are in there. An occasional lens, some lenses are not. So I don't know what lenses let me see in this group. This group I'm probably using all lenses that, this is something you can do up in the library filter. So I want to see what lenses did I use. And you can see all the lenses I used for this project. So I can almost guarantee you, let's see, develop. So here's a 50mm lens. Go to the next one because I think it will be a little more dramatic. And I'll click it. Oh, and it does know it. Huh. But it's a 50, so now there's not a whole, there's a little change, but it's pretty undramatic. Go back to grid. Let's go to the 17 to 25. I'm looking for one that might have that one's the one. That one's going to be more dramatic, the 17 to 35, and that's probably going to have even more aberration on the edges than the other lens that I showed. Does it make it more two-dimensional? That's an interesting question. There is a bend that the lens is causing, and it is correcting for that, particularly in the wide-angle lens. Right. I sometimes like the bend better than not, and so I feel perfectly free to not enable the lens correction if I don't like it. But I'll try it, like a lot of other things, and see. So I mean, this picture.
Most of your photos?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ones, do I do this with most of my photos? I take 10,000 pictures on a trip. So most of them, I'll just go through and say, oh, that was trash, and not do anything with. Do I do it with the ones that I start seriously processing? Right. Yes. With pictures I'm going to try, considering to print, I would go through all these steps you're saying.
You check off enable traffic, by default.
Can you do this by default? There are things you can do when you bring it in, but I like to. I'll check on that. You can make a preset, and we'll talk about presets and synchronizing in just a second, because we're at 1 hour. Okay. So you could make a preset that would do this, but you'd have to make sure that you were enabling the right correction. And when you import it, you could probably, so you can see that in the synchronize, so I'm opening the synchronization. I'll go over it step by step since I just jumped to it without any warning, that the lens correction can come in with it. So you could synchronize it. So I have these pictures that all were taken with this lens, and so now they're all going to be adjusted. You can see them adjusting as I go to them. So yeah, I mean you could do it synchronized. Since I do tend to kind of decide if I like it or not, it is one of the things I tend to do manually. But there's not any reason you couldn't automate it like a lot of things in Lightroom. Okay.
If you did have it on import or in your setting, could you then go back and change it?
So the question is, if you did it on import, could you change it? You can. You can change anything you do on import. You can go all the way back. So say that I did a lot of things to a picture. I don't know what picture that is. So I went black and white, and I go way up in clarity, and I do lots of different things. I have a couple, that's not a good thing. I have a couple things I could do, and I would go to lens correction. It's enabled. And we make it breathe. No, we don't make it breathe. Okay. So I could do all that. I could just hit reset. And when I hit reset, everything goes away, back to the import settings. Now, if you're already at import, if you've made changes on the way into import and you hit reset, they'll go away also. But you kind of can't pick and choose. You probably could come in. You have to try that. I think if you could come in and change that singular thing, but you have to do it manually.
Right.
So if you had an import button, and we'll talk about presets, and you can import with presets, you would have to go in and change that one thing if you didn't want to lose all of the things that you import preset with. So you could do reset. Well, but if you brought import, none of these are imported with anything. Let me try that on break, and I can probably answer it better. You could hit reset, and it would get rid of all the settings you imported. But say that, like I have the infrared camera, and I bring that in with a particular profile. I don't want to, and I could bring it in with a profile, the lens correction, and a little bit of exposure correction. Say I just want to get rid of the exposure correction. If I reset, I'm going to lose those other two things I don't want to lose. So I could manually just change the exposure. But this is all very fluid. It's not like it's a whole lot of work. So don't get too hung up on that.
It seems like in most cases, you would want to do the lens correction.
Yeah.
At least in my case, so I would want to have.
So you do have it on your import. So Kathy's saying that it would be easy to forget the lens correction, so she likes to do it on import. And I can show you how to do that. So if you go back to import, sorry, let me find something I can actually import. The problem is they probably already are imported. Don't. So, and I'm going to copy them so that we get, because if I just add, I don't get, I can do development. I have certain development settings I can do. If I do copy, yeah, I would have to have a user. You can see I actually do have a user. I have a user recipe for my infrared. I have a user recipe for my tone. So I could bring these in with these controls, and you could make a preset that had a lens correction on it. And I can do that next if people are interested. Reminder that you're not affecting the original photograph in all of this. So let's go back here. Let's go back to my I'll go back to this one, and I'll go back to my crazy, wild split tone. Split tone effect and some clarity. So when I do all these things to this picture and you see it in Lightroom, if I right-click or control-click and I show it in the Finder, you'll see that right now that picture has had no changes to it. The only place those changes live right now is in Lightroom. Sandy?
Defringing. I noticed you didn't touch the sliders. Why do we have sliders?
That would be for more fine-tuning and so defringing is the question, and I didn't touch the sliders. Let's go back in this one and go here. Here. So in this case, these are more and more fine-tuning. Let's quickly, sorry. So if this wasn't enough, which I've had pictures where this wasn't enough, then I could go and try to move these to do more. I can also use this if there still was a kind of fringing here. I could click on that edge, and it cannot set it because it's not there, but it would find more. So you can find purple and green, and you can click on them, and then you can fine-tune it so that you're not affecting your picture's colors, but only affecting the fringing. So this is a further level of refinement. If you have and particularly if you have a lens that has a lot of fringing, or you'll often see it. I don't know if I can see it in this one. Let's undo this one. Sometimes on edges and where there's this kind. Look, do you see it there? I don't know if I can get this bigger. Can I get this bigger? No, other way. Do you see that? I mean, that's really evident. So you could actually take this and do it by clicking on there, and that would fine-tune the fringing. So it's more and more elaborate tools as you get deeper into Lightroom, and you can work it to really hopefully get rid of all of the. You can see there I'm making it bigger, and I'm making it smaller. Okay. I'm going to show syncing. I'm going to mention that this is a link to the Juliana Cost video. It's about 20-25 minutes. There is a version for Lightroom 4, 5, and 6. And so these are available if you'd like, when you want to spend more time. She's very good at going over a lot of things that I'm saying and going into deeper detail with them. And then we're going to, okay, so we'll talk about syncing before we get to virtual copies. I'm going to show syncing in a couple ways. First, I'm going to do a preset. And you can see I have a number of presets already in here. Lightroom comes with some presets. And then I've actually downloaded Trey Radcliffe's, a couple of Trey Radcliffe's presets. And then I've created some of my own presets. Presets are very easy to create. So I'm going to go back to the history on this one and go back to that place that I liked. So I like this effect. Maybe I don't, but I make believe I like this effect. And this is what I want to do to it. So now I can come up here and I can call this contrasty black-white castle effect. Okay? And you can see, and I could choose. In this case, I have everything I've done to this picture is clicked. So when I apply this to another picture, all of those things will be applied to the other picture. I could also decide, okay, that's fine, but I don't want the lens correction applied, or I don't want something else applied. But I'm going to just create this, and you can see contrasty black and white castle effect is right here.
So while you're in the develop module, you hit the plus on presets, and that's how this happens?
Yes, you hit the plus on preset, and then it will give you the option to create a preset. So now, when I go to my next picture, and we can do a different, we won't even do a castle, we'll go wild, and we'll go to a tree. And even though it's a tree and it's called castle, I just click on here, and it applies all of those things. So now, these two pictures, I lost it. Sorry. There's one. The tree. Where's the tree? It disappeared. Okay, let's just do it again. I'll apply it to something else. I'll go here, develop, contrasty black and white effect, go back to library, and so now you can see, now it has a very different effect on this other image, but I can now take that preset and I can go in and start fine-tuning it after that. But the basic qualities of the picture were applied to the new picture. So that's how you, if you have a preset, you go to develop, you hit the plus, you save the preset, and then you can apply it to any other image. And also, as you saw before in the import, I have the option of applying it on import. Now, you'd want to be careful with that. Generally, what I apply on import are things you really, truly want to happen globally. But you can do that. The other way, and then we're going to go back to file name. That's my sort order. Remember, you can change your sort order at any time. And I'm going to come down here. And I'm going to take all the castles. And I'm going to say, okay, this is the castle. This is the one I like. I want, okay, it's obviously the same picture, but we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to click here and say sync settings. And when I do that, that effect will be immediately applied to everything else that's chosen. Now remember this very, very subtle thing. This is the most chosen picture. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to go like this. So now can you see that this one is the most chosen? The middle one is the most chosen? If I say sync settings now, let me cancel it and make it bigger so you guys can see it. So now this is the most chosen because it has the white border. When I say sync settings, what's going to happen, he's going to turn back to green, right? So whichever one is the most chosen, and I'll tell you that's something I do pretty regularly, get one picture perfect, try to apply it to lots of other pictures and have the wrong picture selected and change it, you know, but Command Z is our friend. So let's say I want this picture to have the same effect as this picture. Make sure this is the most chosen. Right? This is most chosen.
What do you mean by most chosen?
See the white line? So even though, so let me get a cup. So if I am grabbing this picture, that's interesting. I wouldn't think that. Okay, well, anyway, I'll pick one that's close to it. If I have this one and this one chosen, so I've used the command key or control key, the one that is just a little bit brighter is most chosen. That's the one that will be the source of the synchronization. If I click in the middle of this one, now 8407 is most chosen.
Most chosen is just the one that's selected?
Well, there's selected and most selected. See, both of these images are selected. See, this is gray, this is lighter gray, and this is lightest gray. So this one is the main target image. This is the image that when I hit sync settings will affect all the rest.
How did you make it?
By clicking in the middle of it. So that might be a good, so if say I want to choose a picture, I click in the middle of it. If I want to check, if I click in the next one, now you can see that one selected. If I wanted to select both of these, then I could hold the Command or Control key. Now they're both selected, they're both lighter than these guys, right? But this one is most selected. And that will be, if I do synchronized settings, if I go to develop, the most selected is what will pop up. So it's a degree of selection.
How did you get when you did it where you chose the 3 photos?
Mm-hmm.
Like just the 3 photos pop up?
So if I select 6 photos, in this case, this is most chosen, these are all selected, these are not selected. I hit an N, or down here in the survey mode, right? Hit an N, so now I can just see those 6 photos. The one that is most selected has a little white line around it. Can you guys see that? Okay. If I do C, then I have compare. The most selected is the selected, and the one next to it is the candidate. And I can use the arrow keys to go through them to compare them. If I take this picture to develop, and I do some, I always end up black and white because it's so dramatic, but maybe I'll just do something really wild. So if I do some really strange effect to it, so you can really see the changes. Okay. When I go back to the grid, that's most selected. These are all selected. These are not selected. In fact, I'll hold the command and unselect this, right? So we have 4 selected, 1 most selected. Then I say synchronize settings. Click synchronize. Pop, 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 right?
Where did you
Sync settings is right in the lower corner. Okay. Then we want to quickly Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, please. And you can see that I can Command Z quite a bit. Command Z will go back and back and back and back. Kelly.
What's the page difference for sync settings and sync settings?
I tend to use sync settings and sync, but you can see that sync settings will apply. Let's go back to develop, and you can also paste. And so if you had done, generally it's like a 1-to-1. So synchronize you can do to a group. You could eventually, just like you said, let's go to black and white so it's more dramatic and quick. Okay. So now when I go to the next one, oh, right, sorry. I have to go here. I go copy. I tell it what to copy. And then when I go to the next one, I can paste it.
Copy paste go to a different folder.
Yes.
That's it.
So mainly it's about just like any memory. If you copied it and it's in the memory, when you pick another picture, you can paste it. And you can actually sync settings across folders too. So like if I take this picture here, I'll take these 2 folders. Okay, make sure one is from each folder. Okay. Well, I can go to a collection. Take it out. Let's go here. B. I'll go to a different folder, B. So now I have these 2 pictures. We know they're from different folders. If I go to develop, then I'll just do a quick black and white, clarity, and then copy. Then when I go to the other picture, we know this is in a different folder, and I can paste. So, nope, yeah. That's kind of nice. Oh, cool. Okay, a couple other things I want to, so synchronization, were there questions about the synchronization? So you can paste effects, you can synchronize a group of images, you can make a preset that you can use over and over. So if something you're going to use again and again, I have to say I don't use copy and paste much. I either synchronize or I make a preset. If I'm going to use it more than once, I make a preset. And anything, you know, if you just look here and say, well, these are flowers, I don't want them black and white anymore, click Reset, and you're all the way back to the original settings. Kelly. Yes, the synchronized effect local adjustments. Let's go over some local adjustments and so people know what those are. So here's a picture from, we hope it has GPS in it. Yes, Prague. And I'm going to go develop. And I'm going to start out kind of seeing if I have a place I want neutral. I might. White cloud seems like an okay idea. I might want, I'll show you this. This is the first of our tools on our toolbar here. And this is the crop tool. I want the bridge to be straighter, so I'm going to take the angle tool and drag it across the bottom of the bridge, and then double click so it straightens the picture a little bit. Then I'm going to definitely give it 10 more clarity and 10 more vibrance. And if you ask me why, it's because I've done this a while and that sounds like a good idea. And in a few short weeks you can say that too. Then I might just go down, let me see what you guys are seeing. Okay, I'm going to go down a little tiny bit on the exposure to make it richer. And then I really want the sky to pop more, so I'm going to, I'll just show you. This is a clone and healing tool. I'm going to go to 100. And it seems really hard to believe that there wouldn't be a dust spot, right? I knew I could find one if I looked hard enough. My sensors are suffer deeply from changing lenses. So since I have this, which is the spot removal tool, I just paint over here, and it goes away. And then I go down. There's another spot. Can you guys see that? Paint on that. Goes away. You can choose between clone and heal. Let's see the overlay. And you'll see that when I painted, it chose from another area. Lightroom is relatively clever about where it chooses from, except when it's not, and suddenly you have a sand in the middle of the sky or something really weird. So, but I can actually decide that I don't like where it took it from, and I can drag it to another area. So if you didn't like the area that it took it from, you can move it around. So here's my spot, and here's my where it's picking up clone information from. So it's automatically doing it, and you get to pick. The next one is red eye, and since there are no pictures of people, we won't see that today. I'll have to find a picture to do red eye correction on, but it is here. And you can do red eye or pet eye. Then the next one is the mask, which sorry, graduated filter. What is that? And so in the graduated filter, I actually do use this a lot. If I want the sky to be affected differently, I'm going to drag like that. Maybe. Okay. So this is the graduated filter. I'm going to actually move it up a little bit so you guys can see it, hopefully better. Take this one out. And what happens with this is everything above here is fully affected by the change I make. This is a transition, and nothing is affected down here. So let's just do a really radical effect. So you can see how it affects it. So you guys could see that above the line, full effect. Transition, no effect. And so with all of these controls, color, exposure, contrast, highlight, shadow, clarity, saturation, and sharpness, noise, moire, and defringe, you can do this, which is really kind of interesting. You also notice something else that's true of the entire development. If I double-click on exposure right now, it'll go back to 0. Double-click on sharpness, back to 0. If I had a lot of different controls all over the place, double-click on effect, goes back to 0. So I definitely want this guy to have an effect, so I'm going to go down about 50. And I'm actually going to move this where I actually wanted it to start with, which is more like here. And I'm going to go a little more saturation. Get a little bit of the pink. What do you think? Still doesn't look that great up there. Oh, sorry. How about that? Okay. So, and let's do a before and after and hide that. Big change in a few seconds, right? So the graduated filter is a really good tool for choosing part of a picture and having an effect happen. This is the radial filter. I'll use it on this and then take it off. And on the radial filter, let's have an effect on it. It actually is a circle. And it's times where you want, and you can either have it get darker or lighter. So it's like, you can use it like a vignette. You can use it where you have where you need a spotlight on a face. You can use it in lots of different ways. And the last one is the adjustment brush. So say that I want this area here lighter, but I don't want to lose any of the exposure, contrast, or tones in the other areas. So I'm going to actually I'm just going to paint right along here. I probably would paint at a larger scale, but I'm just going to paint really quickly so you guys can see it. And I do have the auto mask on, which is actually pretty amazing in terms of finding edges. So if I hover, you can see where I painted and how it found the edges of the bridge to only affect the bridge. And I don't really have to worry. I mean, if I look at this, I kind of like it actually. It's kind of scary. But if I look at it and I say, oh, that's overdone, I have my painting, I have my mask made. So now I can just go down and I can adjust. And I can adjust almost, as much as I want for the entire life of the picture. Mike?
How did you make the mask visible?
When I have some controls here. I can have the pins always show, never show sometimes. I can also click here and have the mask show. But if I have it on auto and I hover over the pin, then the mask will show. So I'm hovering over the pin. How did I make the mask show? By hovering. I can also change the color of the mask. In this case, green is not a bad choice for the mask. But if it wasn't a good choice, I can come over here and choose red, green, white, or black. And I also can use O to show overlay, and I can use a keystroke control that I can never remember, and an O. Is that a shift? Yeah, okay. Shift O to change the color. So let's be fancy. So Ooh, it's like a light show. I like the green. So, and then if I just do O, I can make it show and not show by clicking O on and off. Overlay. Where's the mask tool? The mask tool is right here. Where is the mask tool? So this is, well, there's a mask for many things. That's an interesting way. This is an adjustment brush. When you paint with the adjustment brush, you make a mask, right? When you use the gradient filter, you also make a mask. Just it's a tool. It's which tool you use to make the mask, and the same with the radial, R-A-D-I-A-L, radial filter. And if we see it before and after, is it better? A little bit, yeah. There's more work to do, but we're on our way. Okay. So the question was, on this one, I have done specific effects. And this is something to consider. I'm going to go back to my grid. I'm going to make my thumbnails a bit larger so we can see it. Not that large. And I want to take the effect on this one. I was on a tripod. That doesn't help a lot, does it? Okay, and I want to apply it. So I did the effects on this one. I'm going to apply it to the same scene. So this scene's in the same place, just a different time of day, a little bit later and a longer exposure. So, sorry about that. So I have these two. This is the most selected. I'm going to apply what I did to this to here. And I'm going to just say all of them. What do you see? See this? That's the painting I did on the bridge. That was a bad idea. Don't do that. What I could do, though, when I sync settings, is what? Uncheck local adjustments. So then it won't take the spotting off the original one, but it won't paste it onto the new one. So we hope. So now it just gives it the sky effect. And even then, that's going to be a little bit of a problem because if we go here, the sky isn't in exactly the same place. And so I might, but I could actually go to my develop module, and then when I choose this, and I say show the pin, I can see where my pins are. And oh, I guess it was there. And I can move it. So those little pins are the circles. They show where the gradient filter is and where it's affecting. So I might move this up a little bit since this horizon's a little higher. Okay. All right, something I want to get to before we get too much further is virtual copies and snapshots. I also have things set up to do HDR and panorama, if I can talk fast enough. So, virtual copies. Remember, virtual copies are other stories about your pictures. That you can have two pictures. This one is the original picture. This one is the virtual copy. And they can do different things. So say I had a slideshow that was going to be all in black and white. I might use the right-hand picture to be in that slideshow, but I could still end up using the left-hand picture as a color print. So when you need the pictures to actually do two different things, that would be a case where you'd want to do virtual copies. So if I come to Lightroom and I come back to my trees, I'm going to get these back to color, regular color. Okay, I'm going to go back to the grid, and I'm going to select this whole group of trees, and I'm going to make a collection of them. And when I make this new collection, I have the option to include the selected photos and make virtual copies as I make the collection. So now I have this collection, and I'm going to go and I'm going to make them black and white. Okay, so now I can see whether I like this set as a black, starting as black and white. Now when I go back to my main group, you'll see now I have 7191, copy 1. 7200, 7200, copy 1. And so now I have twice as many pictures of that set because I have one that's in color and one that's in black and white. So let's see. Yes. I haven't tried that recently. Thank you for that question. The question was, can you give different keywords to the virtual copy? And so if I choose the color ones, of this set and give them the keyword green, I think, I'll have a caveat in a second about that, I think, right? And then if I come over here and I want to give a keyword to the virtual copy of black and white, so this virtual copy has one keyword and the original has a different keyword, right? But if I took this one and I made a virtual copy of it, it now keeps it. So if you did the keywords beforehand, the keywords will go with the virtual copy. Yeah, you could use, if you're going to do a slideshow, you could filter on black and white, but you'd have to do the keywords after you did the virtual copy, and any keywords you did before would follow the virtual copy. Okay, there's a couple ways. That's a really good question. There's a couple. How do you really make a virtual copy? One way would be to go to Photo, create virtual copy, and then you'll make a virtual copy. And you'll notice there's a keystroke there, which is Command apostrophe. Command apostrophe will make a keyword with a stroke. But also, when you make a collection, you have the option, when you make the collection, to either include the selected photographs or not, and to make a new virtual copy of those pictures as you make the collection. So if you knew you wanted to make a black and white set to see how they looked, you could make them virtual copies at this point. Downsides of virtual copies. Virtual copies only live in Lightroom until you export them. They only live in Lightroom. So if I was to do, go to one of the pictures that we made changes to, edit time. If I was going to go to this picture, which is not a virtual copy, it's an original image. It's a mess, it's a raw file. I've made these rather horrific changes to it. But because I have my preferences set in my catalog to, and I don't right now, I usually have them set to write the changes into XMP. So these changes that I've made to this file, if I have that set, and I'm not because this is just a working test catalog that I made to show you guys this tonight. But in my master catalog, I have this one checked. I have automatically write changes into XMP. So what happens is my raw files, the changes I make in Lightroom, the developed changes, get written into the raw file and are available to me when I go to Bridge or to Photoshop.
So where are the virtual copies?
They're only in Lightroom.
They're not in the XMP.
Where are the virtual? They're not in the XMP. They'll just be in Lightroom. Virtual copies are only in Lightroom. Now you can still export them, You could export it and make a TIFF out of it, or you could export it into a slideshow. But in terms of some people have been asking, how do I save my Lightroom changes other than in Lightroom? Well, you can write it out to the raw file. So I can actually take this one right now, and I can tell it to save the metadata to file.
Like you said, that all changes in Lightroom
all changes in Lightroom don't affect the original. They don't change the original, but they can be saved to it. So let's go to this in Finder. And now you'll see so there's that folder, that picture, right? And so KJ17755.NEF still looks like the same picture. But this little file is an instruction file. And I have written the instructions, my Lightroom instructions, into that file. So let's just open this in Photoshop. So it's opening it with my Lightroom changes. Now I can turn those off at this point. I can reset it. I can open a copy. I'm holding down the Option key. I can reset it. I can change it back to, I can come up here as someone else and reset camera raw default. I think that was Marion's question at some point. So there's a lot of things I can do to get rid of what I did, but I have it saved in the file. So that's fine. Let's cancel that. Let's go back to Lightroom. Now let's say that this was one possibility. This black and white, I got to make it better before we go any further, sorry. Get the shot, highlights and shadows down. Get a little vignette. Okay, much better, right? Sort of better. So now, say I kind of like this, but I want to say, I really think, I thought the color picture was kind of interesting too. So what I might choose to do instead, is a snapshot. So I'm going to hit snapshot, and I'm going to call this black and white castle effect, because that was what it was called. I clicked the plus in snapshots. So I clicked on plus in snapshots, and so now I have a snapshot with this effect. And then I'm going to reset, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go on my exposure, and I'm going to make the best picture I can out of the color. I love this reflection. Isn't it just amazing place? And so, so now I have the effect I want in color. Click the plus. Call this color castle create. So now I have two snapshots here. When I open this, and I can go to Photo, Edit in Photoshop, Frame. It's going to do what I think it does. It may or may not. No, we don't want the advertising. We don't want to do that. I'm going to give this a quick way. There's probably better ways, but. I want to make sure it opens in camera raw, and I don't have my settings quite right, so now I'm opening camera raw. Okay, so now this is what it looked like in Lightroom. It's opening camera raw, but if I come down here, look what I have. The snapshots live inside of the file, so I can access the black and white effect and the color capture from inside the snapshot in camera raw. So that if you just want to try different things, so say you get a certain way and you go, maybe I'm there, but maybe I want to go in this other direction. Rather than creating more and more and more virtual copies, you might consider a snapshot as kind of a frozen moment in your history that you'll be able to access in Camera Raw if you're going to Photoshop. Okay, so that's there are snapshots. You click the little plus sign, and this particular one has two. It has a black and white and a darkened background snapshot. So there are moments in history, and you can access them here. And this illustrates it if you want to review this later. Where does your snapshots live in your library? They live in the Develop module under Snapshots, just below Presets in Develop. So you have, in Develop you have Presets, then you have your Snapshots, then you have your History, and then you have your Collections.
But if you make a bunch of snapshots, so like a bunch of different photos over time, then aren't you going to have like a million snapshots?
So the question is if you make a lot, no, a snapshot, if you made a lot of snapshots, it's not, these snapshots won't show any place but in this one picture.
Oh, okay.
So like a preset can be used on any photograph. A snapshot is saved within a singular picture. So you won't, if I go to the next picture, it has no snapshots. I go to the next picture, it has no snapshots. So you have to save the snapshots. This has no snapshots, but it does have a history. Okay? So you can see these are all virtual copies with all different effects, but you have to make sure that you need to have 4 separate threads on a picture versus just versions that you want to save. And this is where Lightroom becomes a real advantage. Some of you who have used Photoshop for a while, where you end up with all these different versions and you don't know which version is the right one. Now they're all inside one container that you can study. Another video that you can watch on your own time, when to use virtual copies and snapshots in Lightroom. It actually is a very old version, but the concepts that Juliana Koss talks about is still valid. And so her video is here for you to watch when you would like. So I'm going to talk, I have a few more minutes before we take a break. Not very many. I know you guys really need a break. We'll do that in just a second. I'm going to save talking about Lightroom to Photoshop and back because I did want to show, I put some together for some things that are in Lightroom that I do want to show you. And one is Pano. So you see my hand. And that hand, for me, tells me, oh, I did something. Because when I'm going to start a panorama in the field, I take a picture of my hand. And then when I end that panorama, we pray, I take a picture of my hand. Sometimes, so if you're going to do a series of pictures, so let's look at this in grid, that all fit together to make a longer picture. And I have one here, but I'm going to do it in front of you. In the field, I'll take a picture. Some people just do a finger. I take a picture of my hand, click, 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 click around in a panoramic, then I do another hand. And that tells me this is the start, this is the end of the panorama. There's a couple ways to do panoramas. How many people are interested in panoramas here? Almost everyone's hand went up. Ideally, you will have a really, really stable tripod. You will carefully balance the whole thing. You will have one of the special super duper expensive heads that will let you do it with but I generally pop it on top of my tripod and go around in a circle and then I pray. I like praying. Edit. So one way to do it is edit, merge in panorama in Photoshop. And the other way is in Lightroom, photo merge panorama. I have articles and I'll post them in the discussion about which way is better. You can do more tweaking of the panorama in Photoshop, but you can do more ongoing adjustments of the image in Lightroom because what it's going to make is a digital negative. It's a raw file. So we're going to do it right now. I'm not going to auto crop this time. And it's creating a panorama as we wait. It's not fast. Some people complain about that. It seems like a good time to go get a cup of coffee to me, but you know, what are you going to say? But there it is. There, put all those pieces together, and then I'll say merge. And you can see up here in this area right here, it's telling me that it's creating a panorama. I will, while we're waiting for it to create the panorama, I'll go to the one I created earlier today where I did crop it down. And you can see that it adjusted it. And I actually already did some adjustments of this by darkening the sky and creating some effect. If I go to crop, you can see how, because I didn't have my camera perfectly level, I would have to do more adjustments. And we'll see what the next one does. I actually did, yeah. I stitched it, and then because this is a DNG, I was able, the question was, I did do my adjustments on the final version. Because it's a DNG, I did all the exposure adjustments on the panorama, which in Lightroom. This entire thing was done in Lightroom. So if I had taken it out to Photoshop, I would have a TIFF, and I would have lost the power of adjusting for the panorama. Exactly. If you do each picture separately, they might not match up. So here it's going to do its best job. Kelly, did you have a question? No. Okay. So this is going to take a while. While it's doing it, I'm going to show the other thing that you can do with Lightroom, which is HDR. And I have some pictures, I'm going to put this one up here, where, so that's not a good idea. Let's do this one. So here's one with the sky, lots of luminosity in the ground and in between. So it's just a quick three exposure. Again, I go up Photo, Photo Merge, HDR. And it's going to, you have some options. HDR means high dynamic range. So if you, and some people here, you might ask them, they do multiple, many high dynamic range images. I often will over and underexpose and do high dynamic range light. I mean, I want to get the details in the shadows, but I don't want anything that looks false. I'm looking for very, very naturalistic effects in the end. But it's a way to kind of bring in, and you can see, bringing in those clouds while keeping so much detail in the ground. I can see ghost, high, low, or medium, low. It's going to align, so auto align and auto tone, depending on how much you want to do it. I don't know if you're going to see any difference here. And then on this. And so let's go back to the panos, since I'm going to stop talking in just a minute and take a break. So now we have this version that you can see that did not crop it out. It's going to take a little while to draw. It is a really, 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 really large picture. Look how big it is. 22,000 pixels long. How big a print did I make? Anyone do the math? So what would I do with this next? I would go to Develop. I would go and bring down the highlights a little bit, open up the shadows, and I'm going to just do quick things. But then my next option would be, even though it's very, very large, would be to edit in Photoshop and use the power of Photoshop, which we'll talk about next time, on how to go back and forth between Photoshop and Lightroom, to create the missing parts so that I can get the top of the mountain. If I had been more careful when I shot it, I might have gotten that, but that's... Okay. Questions or thoughts at this point? In the HDR picture, I was one stop off. Some people will do 5 stops, some people will do more. But in the HDR pictures, I was one stop on either, one stop plus, one stop minus light on. Mike.
I tried to do an HDR where I always came to the sky and to the clouds.
Mm-hmm. Mike tried one over, one under, and Lightroom couldn't blend them. Sometimes Lightroom will have a hard time blending, depending on what clues it had on how to blend them. In that case, you would be, and we'll talk about that next week, better to go out to Photoshop and either do it with the Photoshop tools, which are a little bit more powerful, or do it with manually, which I've also done, where I've actually made masks to choose sky and ground when things have been dramatically off. It may be that you had so much difference between them, it couldn't find a commonality. But yeah, sometimes it will say it can't do it, and then it just can't. Like Photoshop will always try to bang something out, and Lightroom just says, "Oh, this is a bad idea. Don't try it." It's much more parental than Photoshop. Photoshop will let you fail dramatically. Stunning.
The photograph of the light thing that we did last week.
Yeah.
I like 20 images one day, 15 images. I just picked a light one, a medium, and a dark. I picked about 4 or 5 images out of that string, and with HDR on it. And very interesting results. Yeah, so Sunny used the experiments we had last week to do HDR, and HDR can do some interesting things beyond just exposure. So it's something to know about. I usually go 20. I selected a few different exposure values by HDR.
Right. So here's the HDR that it just made. That was the picture that was darker. That was the normal exposure. That was, I don't know what that was. Like, I think that was the light. Yeah, there's the light exposure. And so I think the HDR really does have some nice qualities, and is a really good starting place in this particular case. So those are just some things you can do in Lightroom in the Develop module. We'll have more time for questions, and we'll work on Photoshop to Lightroom and back. There's a video, and then I'll talk about it next week first thing. We're going to have an exercise after our break on our next assignment, which is the recycling assignment, which is really exciting. So let's take a 10-minute break, and thank you guys for your patience. That was a really long run for all of us. So.
Let's go. I can get a lot of stuff out there. First, the audience meeting, you know, actually the audience meeting.